Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from HSH Nordbank New York branch and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Greenberg Traurig LP, Allied Partners, the Moynihan Group. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Antares Real Estate, Arbor Realty Trust, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, Essex Capital Partners, Fremont Investment and Loan, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Muss Development LLC, Rosenthal and Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, the Engel Berman Group, the Witkoff Group, Titan Capital, YL Real Estate Developers.
Welcome to the Stoller Report. My name is Michael Stoller. What's Westchester? What's Greenwich? I mean, these are places that people in New York really don't know about. You know, they're nice places, big shopping centers, fancy homes, but there's a lot of offices out there. And a number of years ago, many companies relocated to these markets over there, and many companies are continuing to go there. Today, I have the guys who really understand what's happening in White Plains and Greenwich. I'd like to thank my guest today, Joseph Benenati, Managing Partner, Antares Investment, Robert Wise, President of RPW Group, and last but not least, Tim Jones, Managing Member of Robert Martin Company. You're the Greenwich guy. You know, you like Greenwich, you like Westchester, you like all over. I mean, you've been involved with it. Who's the office tenant? Who's renting in that market? Who's the type of tenant, and what do they pay as rent? Because, you know, last week we did a show in New Jersey, we've done New York, and people want to know what's happening in that marketplace.
Well, Michael, Greenwich is, if you were to draw an analogy to New York City, it's Fifth Avenue and Park Avenue. So the rents in Greenwich are different than the rents are in Fairfield County and Westchester County, the same way.
But what makes Greenwich such a cachet? I mean, is it the hedge funds, investment advisors? Why, and Robert, you have so much space, and you've had space in Westchester. Well, why is Greenwich such a cachet? Why is it the Fifth Avenue and Park Avenue?
I think for 350 years, a bet against the town's been a bad bet. It's been a place where prominent businessmen have gone now for decades, and the hedge fund community is now globally established Greenwich as its headquarters, and the guys like to live there, and they like to work there. They're accustomed to the research analysts from Bear Stearns running up in 2 radio cars to bring them lunch on their trading floors and talk to them about ideas. So they're not worried about coming to New York City anymore. All of the investment bankers are actually going to Greenwich to pitch ideas to the hedge fund guys and the private equity guys.
Why won't they go? I mean, look at the buildings that you've owned over your career. Why won't they go to 1133 Westchester Avenue or to the Altria building? Why won't they be there?
They do. It's Westchester is a different market than Fairfield, and very different than Greenwich. Westchester traditionally has been a place for headquarters moved from New York City, and that process started in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s. And currently, Westchester County is the home of companies like IBM, Nokia, ITT, and these are the headquarters, and the presence of major banks and other financial institutions, as well as a very well-diversified number of companies. Traditionally, Westchester has been a market that has attracted top executives because that's where people live. Westchester or Fairfield is certainly the area that has the better housing, the most expensive housing, has the best transportation. So in terms of location, I would think that most executives, when they don't live in New York City, they look first at Westchester and Fairfield. The office market has been a different market than the residential market. Westchester now has an average cost of housing that exceeds $700,000 a home, one of the highest in the country. The office market, due to, in my view at least, to an overbuilding during the 70s mainly and early 80s, had an excess capacity that was never really filled by companies moving into the area. So it's been lagging the residential market until now. But we have seen in the past 2 or 3 years, especially, a number of companies coming in on the higher end of the market, and the rents are getting up there. We have seen for the first time rents close to $40 a foot downtown White Plains. We see a solid $30 number plus in the better buildings. So the process is getting there. It's just, I would say that Westchester has a time delay of New York City of approximately 2 years.
But it's more than a time delay.
I think Greenwich is there are several reasons. I'd say approximately 5 reasons why Greenwich is what it is. And some people call Greenwich hedgerow. I think it's a popular, and we were talking before, and Joe was saying that it's not, it's not just the hedge funds, it's also the private equity firms. But there are several reasons they locate there. First of all, there's the quality of life. I mean, the quality of life in Greenwich, if you have money, is really, I mean, I've actually lived in New Jersey, and I've lived in the city, and I've lived in Greenwich, and I've lived in Westchester.
And now you end up in Rye.
I'm in Rye. I like Rye a lot. But Greenwich has got probably the biggest houses if you've got unlimited money. It's got the most private schools, and excellent private schools. There are other private schools, but there's no concentration like Greenwich. I think it probably has the most clubs. It's got fabulous retail down Greenwich Avenue. It's got the access to the city with the train, which is convenient to the city. It's got the water. And it's also, I think Connecticut still has some tax advantages for individuals over New York State. So those are the reasons, and you can see even in Greenwich why, even within Greenwich, you can see how those things drive the pricing, because Greenwich Avenue and the water are kind of the, with the top of the avenue anchoring it and the water being the other end of the real prime market. The rents there are $100 plus. If you go just a few miles away, 3 miles down the road on Putnam into Western Greenwich, the pricing there on the same quality building would be half, $45, $50. Still in Greenwich, still a Greenwich address, still the Greenwich school, public school system, still, access to the private schools, short drive, almost, there's very little structured parking in Greenwich. I think people actually like the surface parking. It's easy to park and get in and out. Still all the reasons, the analysts and the salespeople from New York can come up and have one location, and still Western Greenwich is not far away. But it's just, it's the cachet, it's the price, it's the quality of life. And you can even see that when you go to Stamford, which has a lot of these same attributes. The pricing in Stamford, where the traffic is terrible, is higher than it is anywhere in Westchester County. I mean, I think.
So you're saying Stamford is even more expensive than Westchester County?
Well, you could take you could take this question to any cocktail party, and I'm sure you won't get the answer to it. And that is, if you take New York, London, Tokyo, and Stanford, and ask everyone, where are the 2 largest trading floors in the world? Nobody will tell you Stanford. But the reality is right now UBS has the largest trading floor in the world in Stanford, and RBS is going to build the largest trading floor in the world, which is going to be next door to the UBS building in Stanford. And RBS is a partner of ours, where we have a 7 million square foot assemblage of land on the water in Stanford. And what we're absolutely certain of is that in the next 5 years, there will be another global financial institution who will come to Stanford. In our case, we hope it'll be on the water, not because Stanford is the greatest place in the United States, but simply because there's not 1 million feet available in New York City. We can do
But there is 1 million square feet in New Jersey. I mean, the week ago when I did my Jersey show, Jersey City in Hoboken has 20 million square feet, and they can build another.
But But you
million
don't,
square
right,
feet.
but you don't have to be a pioneer in Stanford now. You can build, you will be next to the 2 largest trading floors in the world, so maybe you're the 3rd largest trading floor in the world, and you have a rail system that is 29 minutes to Grand Central Express. And 29 minutes is basically a subway stop from Midtown to downtown. And if you're on the 6, it's 3 subway stops.
I mean, the Jersey City and the Gold Coast are closer, but they don't have all the private schools. They don't have
Jersey City has limited private schools.
but they
don't have amenities.
They don't have
aspects.
and the other thing that you have is it's kind of like New Jersey's pharmaceutical concentration. You have a talent concentration, and people are doing deals together. They're walking across the street and doing deals. They're stealing each other's employees. They're raising capital. It's just there is synergy, and there's a concentration.
Isn't that Greenwich as opposed to Stanford?
Greenwich, Stanford. It's
I'll tell you, pick up this week's issue of New York Magazine, and they talk Greenwich about the hedge fund guys. The reality is there are a lot of prominent hedge funds, SAC Capital, to name the most prominent, are actually now headquartered in Stanford. Not because they don't like Greenwich. The problem with Greenwich, and I will tell you as a Greenwich guy and a person who has a large investment in Greenwich, is there's just not enough of it. So if you
so why don't like you just said that White Plains in Westchester, I think it's 20 years since the last new building, office building.
More
At
than
least
20
maybe
years.
25
Yeah,
years.
mid-80s.
Okay, so you haven't had one new
Mid-80s.
office building in 25 years. Okay, and there's not really a need. There may be a need finally for one office building or 2 in the White Plains, Westchester community. Why don't they, since everybody sounds like they should be in Greenwich, these investment funds, these hedge funds, why aren't there new office buildings being built in Greenwich?
they have to be on the train station. In order to get that New York tenant.
So what Tim said is the company who's 3 miles away doesn't get that. You have to be on the train station. You have to be within a 3-block vicinity.
There's just a pricing disparity.
It's not different than New York City. The GM building is getting rents in excess of $150, $180 a foot. You can be 15 blocks away, and the rents are $45 a foot.
Right.
So,
unfortunately, the rents in Midtown are over $70 a foot now.
Well, but you still
it's
can-
much more beneficial to go up to your buildings and
absolutely,
you don't have.
absolutely. But you can still get lower rents on Lexington Avenue in the low 40s, and true, you're not the same quality buildings, but the location is key, and the location within blocks makes a tremendous difference. And if you're on Park, it's a different rate than if you're on 3rd, or if you're on Madison, or if you're on 5th. The same thing applies to where we are. So if you're in Greenwich in certain location, you can get over $100 a foot. You can be in Greenwich in a different location, still a good location, and the rent is no more than $45 a foot. Similar to what's happening in Westchester. If you're downtown White
agree with that.
Plains, right now the market in downtown is in single-digit numbers of vacancy, and the rates are in excess of $40 a foot. First time ever in the history of
Right,
White
I wanted
Plains.
to, in your career, and you've had many years in the Westchester market, and you've had probably similar. When was the last time you ever saw vacancy under a double digit?
Never in the history of White Plains. The first time ever that the vacancy is below 10%.
That's
And
White Plains.
right now there is more demand than space available.
What do you attribute this to? Capelli country, Trump houses, St. Regis. I mean,
I think Tim talked about some big drivers before. I mean, technology has been a major driver. I mean, there are
for White Plains.
No, just in general for these suburban markets. We all close a transaction now and are doing virtual closings where there's huge PDF documents being emailed that used to require that 10 or 20 people would come to New York City and sit in Skadden Arp's office while there were word processors working and people were actually signing documents. So I think that's had a very, very big impact on the ability for people to not... Wall Street has become more of a figurative place today than it's ever been.
I mean,
It's not
Wall
literally
Street,
Wall Street.
if you go down Wall Street, with the exception of 2 buildings, there are no buildings on Wall Street. There are office buildings. They're all residential. I mean, so that's changed.
Well, that's a perfect example.
Okay, but my comment is, why has White Plains gone below double digit and to a $40, which is probably never You've
No,
never
It's a
seen
combination of a couple of things. I believe that the downtowns throughout the country are attracting now residential and office space like it has not happened in maybe 50 years. So this is not a phenomenon that is happening only in White Plains. If you go to Westchester, you're going to see that the skyline in New Rochelle has changed dramatically. And you see 30 and 40-story buildings when you never saw them before.
Do we see 30 or 40-story office buildings?
Not
in
yet.
New Rochelle,
Not
I
yet.
see
No, only
rental
resident-
buildings
Yeah,
residential
or
office buildings anywhere.
condominiums.
Residential,
Yeah.
but people want to work closer to where they live. So the office and the residential factor has a combination factor that we have never seen before. Stanford is a great example. Stanford has one major problem, and that's transportation. It's very hard to get around. 95 is a parking lot. Over the past 5 to 10 years, we have seen a tremendous amount of residential buildings going up. So now you have the workforce to work in the office buildings. Similar to what's happening in White Plains. You see a tremendous amount of residential being developed. Retail is going with it. Eventually, office space is going to come as the buildings are full, and a few projects now are on the drawing board for the first office buildings to come to the market in 25 years.
Now, in New Jersey, my guest last week said that there are light rail that's being built. You're doing a development in Jersey City, a residential development, but these light rail is helping, because as you just say in Stanford, you can't get around, the cars and everything. Do you see the municipalities or the governmental agencies in Greenwich or in Westchester possibly building these light rail systems?
There's actually a task force studying right now. It's not light rail, but studying an east-west train, which has been looked at a number of times, but a train that would connect Rockland County kind of along the 287 spine and would go east from Rockland County over to the Long Island, what's the line, the New Haven line, and then connect up to Stamford, which I think would be fabulous. Because I think a large part of White Plains desirability right now is the train station. A lot of it's driven by Midtown. People, if you're relocating from Midtown, you're going to look at White Plains. You're going to look at Stamford. You're going to look at Greenwich, and White Plains is more affordable than Stamford or Greenwich.
Right, and I think you or either on one of my panels or one of my presentations both said that they're the labor force. I mean, we talk about the hedge fund, we talk about the executives, but we talk about the workers. Where are the workers coming from? I think you said to me they come from Rockland. Perhaps.
Well, one of the things,
the secretaries, the office managers. Where do these people? They can't afford to live in Greenwich, with the private schools or something like that.
Well, Greenwich, it's an interesting, Tim's right on in terms of why the high end loves Greenwich. Also, Greenwich is, the safest city or safest town in the state of Connecticut with the #1 public school system and such a low tax rate that actually if you are from middle income means it's a wonderful place to live as well because you've got a lot of amenities. You've got a Robert Trent Jones designed golf course, a great museum, a great library because the town is been so well capitalized
right, but
for so long.
I'm saying you need a labor force.
If
like
you're
you said to
class,
me on your
you're middle class and you can afford a house that the average price is $2 million. Then it's certainly a great place. It's also great to be middle class and be able to pay that kind of a mortgage.
Right, but I'm talking about the person who's earning $40,000, the secretary, the administrator. Where are these people coming? Where do they live?
That's why
because they have to get there.
Right. That's why New York City is. I mean, that's one of the things that drives New York City is because of the public transportation. People kind of from all walks of life can get to work. I mean, when we did business in Jersey City in the office business, talking to a large tenant there who had relocated from downtown to Jersey City. They searched all around, and they said all of their labor came from Brooklyn and Queens. I said getting to Jersey City was a piece of cake. In fact, it was just as easy as getting to where they were downtown. I think actually what Westchester has there is probably half of the population of Westchester is in affordable towns. And Westchester is also, Yonkers is a quarter of Westchester. It's an affordable place to live. And the lower half of Westchester is still affordable, and it's accessible through reasonable public transportation today, either through train or through bus to most of the office space. But I think that is driving the downtown. It's more accessible to go from those towns to downtown than it is maybe to a suburban campus, and that I think that drives this too.
I have to tell you that we have a few tenants that have moved in from Midtown, and their employees work in the Bronx, and the commute from the Bronx to Westchester, they find it more convenient than from the Bronx to Midtown. We add an amenity to our buildings, which is a free shuttle from the train station that matches the time of the train. So it's usually a 15-20 minute train ride, and then you have a bus waiting for you that's going to take you within 5 to 10 minutes to your office. So the convenience is there. So the reality is that within an hour or less than an hour, you have a number of places where people can work and live. And that is certainly the Bronx, is North of Westchester, is Yonkers, is Portchester, is New Rochelle. So the myth of not having a place to live for people that are making an average salary of $50,000-$60,000 is going away, because we are accepting that we need to travel maybe for 30 minutes, for 40 minutes, for 50 minutes, which is okay when you are in the city and you take the subway maybe in Brooklyn and you have to change 3 subways and then get 45 minutes later to work. But conceptually, people feel that it's not as far as taking a train and drive.
Tim brings up Yonkers. A lot of people live in Yonkers. Well, why isn't Yonkers, the office market, done well in Yonkers?
Well, it's funny, you know, the only spec office building that I know of in Westchester in the past 20 years was built in Yonkers, right by the train station in Yonkers. And I think he's done pretty well. It's not a big building. It's like 90 or 100,000 square feet.
But it's on the train station.
It's right in front of the train station.
But Yonkers is a large area, and it has.
We could devote a week of shows to Yonkers. It's a complex place. It's the 3rd largest city in the state, and it just happens to be in Westchester, and it just has a whole lot.
But historically has been an industrial city. So when you look back at the history of Yonkers, most of the space has been industrial. So office space was not the primary focus. There were just very few buildings dedicated to offices. And there is a change now, mainly as a result of a lot of residential development. Yonkers is changing dramatically, and it has a very effective government, a very pro-business government, and offices are going to come to Yonkers.
Yeah,
but you need to change the process of the last 50, 60 years. That's a city that has never seen.
How do you, as developers, talk and get companies who are paying $75, $80, $90 a foot in Manhattan, in Midtown? I mean, Lower Manhattan is less expensive. How do you get these companies to want to go up to Westchester or Greenwich? I mean, the creme de la creme who you have in Greenwich are those hedge funds and investment advisors.
Right.
It's a different case. How do you get other companies to make the move from New York City? Because you said some of them are making the move.
Well, there are a number of factors that are helping Westchester, Fairfield, and the other suburbs around the city. And that is the density, the parking needs that companies have, the power needs, and the around-the-clock facilities that are required by some of the hedge funds, by some of the trading floors, and some of the data centers, that we can have the flexibility in Westchester that sometimes you don't find in the city. So the market, in a way, is changing, and the needs of the companies now of having very special requirements and tremendous power needs.
But I'm also talking, I mean, today I had a senior partner, a managing partner of a large law firm, runs the real estate department, and he said that he needed 50,000 square feet of space in the Pan Am MetLife building, which I always age myself. And he said, Tishman Speyer said to him, "You want the other 50? We have it. it's $120 a foot. It's a partnership. It's a professional firm. And he said, you know what? We're moving up to Westchester. It may not be White Plains, because he said White Plains, and he said he's paying $23 a foot. Now look at the cost savings. When you're a professional firm, and this comes directly to the bottom line, this is a big incentive.
These are firms, these law firms, accounting firms, engineering firms, advertising firms. They're really service businesses. Occupancy is an important line item on their budgets, so they are perfect candidates to be tenants that would move from Midtown and would come to White Plains, would come to Stanford. I think the purchase that RFR made last week on the EOP portfolio in Stanford is an indication that they bought a portfolio of buildings for, give or take, $500 a square foot. That would take $750 a foot to rebuild today. And they know that with a 29-minute train ride to New York City, that there are a lot of professional firms that will be candidates.
But in reality, Robert and Tim have been buying buildings in Westchester and paying less than $200 a foot.
They've made a lot of money.
Well, the reality is that the market makes us all look very smart. And a year or 2 years has been an eternity in this business. You have some examples in New York City that are mind-boggling. And recently I read that supposedly the GM building now is appraised for almost $3 billion. And $1.4 billion acquisition price 2-3 years ago was an outrageous number, and people thought that Macklowe was just going to lose the building eventually. So the market has been changing dramatically, and numbers are changing everywhere. The Westchester market now is certainly, in terms of price per pound, the most attractive market, I would think, in the tri-state area. You certainly can buy buildings for half of what they are worth. So
definitely half of the cost of replacement cost, because construction cost is more than,
and that's reflected on the rents.
Yeah, although I think ultimately, really, what's going to drive the decision is the employees and where the employees are going to work well. So I think you're not going to see somebody whose business is primarily 24-year-old, hard-charging MBAs who want to go out and party the one night a week that the boss lets them off, are not going to relocate to Westchester. They might relocate to Stanford, but they probably want to stay in the city. It's really the companies that have the employees who will be comfortable and will thrive in a market like Westchester or Greenwich or else.
This 7 million foot master plan in Stanford has been, from our perspective, a chance to step back and engage master planners. We use Sasaki and Cooper Robertson to design what is essentially a little city. And when we got input from the governor and we got input from the mayor of Stanford, the input was, we want these people to live and work and shop in a place where they don't need to get into a car.
Now, I'm going to have to get my passport and come up to Greenwich and stay at your hotel, and you owe me a lunch up in Westchester, and I think my audience really got a perspective on some ideas of what's happening in the office market in Connecticut and Westchester, and I'd like to thank you for being here. Joseph Beninati and Terrace, Robert Wise, RPW, and definitely last but not least, Tim Jones, Robert Martin Company. See you next week.
Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from HSH Nordbank New York branch and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Greenberg Traurig LP, Allied Partners, the Moynihan Group. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Antares Real Estate, Arbor Realty Trust, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, Essex Capital Partners, Fremont Investment and Loan, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Muss Development LLC, Rosenthal and Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, the Engel Berman Group, the Witkoff Group, Titan Capital, YL Real Estate Developers.